Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Now, good morning. Now, when we look at anti-corruption governance in the context of laws and bodies, which is the final leg of anti-corruption bodies, well, let's understand exactly how this can be asked in the exam. Now, when we look at anti-corruption laws and bodies, there are either going to be just laws or there are going to be statutory bodies, which are bodies created by laws. Fundamentally, that is the case. Now, when we look at anti corruption laws, we were discussing this earlier. Primarily, we should be looking at the IPC, which is now the BNS, for two purposes. One, to define who the public servants are and to see if there's any mention of corruption here, right? Thereafter, you will only be able to see what are generally called anti corruption laws. And then you primarily have the Prevention of Corruption Act. This Prevention of Corruption Act covers both the definition and corruption. And then you have certain specialized laws like Benami transactions, economic offenses, so on and so forth. Okay. When we look at statutory bodies, we would generally look at bodies which are tasked with the duty of investigating corruption. So you would have CVC as the apex body, then you would have the CBI and Lokpal, which are approximately at the same level of hierarchy, and they are also primarily investigative bodies, but they are subordinate to the Central Vigilance Commission. And at the state level, you would have something called the Lokayukt. Are we okay with this? Do we understand this? Good. This is broadly the most important aspect of our entire ecosystem, right? Now, all said and done, we would also have some primarily anti corruption laws over and above this. If you would remember when we started anti-corruption, uh, the topic, we had done a policy summary. Yes or no? Yes. So that generally covered like the broader aspects of it. Very good. Now, in the exam, we have to look at very careful aspects. One, we would require this primarily for the mains exam. We would require the Prevention of Corruption Act also primarily for the mains exam. We've never seen a question from the prelims in both of these aspects. When we look at some of the specialized laws, again, dominantly focused on the mains. It is generally here that we see questions both from the pre and the mains, and that also CVC and Lokpal. CBI has been asked in the mains, but has been asked from a federal point of view with the larger issue of consent. Correct? Now, given the changing nature of the prelims exam, where larger policy questions have also been started to ask, do we generally also prepare a broader sort of aspect of anti-corruption governance? Yes, but only the basics of it. Like for example, the Income Tax Act would also have some degree of specialization provisions of corruption, which is basically prosecution for undisclosed income, false statements. I'm going to come to that. Just the core objectives of it. PMLA, yes. The Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Third, even the Companies Act for that matter also deals with also deals with generally corporate level corruption, where you have SFIO, the Serious Fraud Investigation Office, which is supposed to deal with primarily offenses for corporate fraud. And the Companies Act also has inbuilt mechanisms for whistleblowing because corporate corruption. Apart from this, you would also have sectoral laws of corruption. One, that's okay, Jagan. Uh, which classes are good? You can, I think for ethics, we're doing it on YouTube. If that's not enough, then you can look at, I think, Piyush is good for ethics. Mudit is good for ethics. If the lectures that we are doing don't work for you, both of them are equally good. Anyway, so for sectoral aspects, RBI, SEBI, they would also have some anti-corruption provisions. Like for example, SEBI would have certain regulations on insider trading. They would have, certain regulations on, say, fraudulent practices and so on and so forth. Correct. Now, as long as we fundamentally understand what the laws are about, we really don't need to get into, other aspects of it. Now, are we okay with this? You're fine with this? And there are three branches of state that we have to monitor: legislature, executive, and judiciary, with core focus on executive level corruption, right? MP MLAs we've also partially covered through the Representation of People's Act. Judiciary, through judicial accountability, such as the Judges Inquiry Act, we've also largely looked at it. Good. Are we okay with this? Fine. If Lokayukt is at the state level and is a mirror agency of the Lokpal, anti-corruption bureaus are mirror agencies of the CBI. They're at the state level. Almost similar kind of work, right? So broadly, this is in a way the universe that we are playing with, and this is generally the universe that we have to keep in mind. Okay, are we okay with this? Yes. All right. Now, we have to be very particular for the exam in terms of how much depth we need to go into, because stuff like Enforcement Directorate, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and Prevention of Money Laundering Act is an internal security issue mostly, but at the same time, ED has been massively in the news on so many fronts. But have we seen a single question, even remotely, on ED in any form? Could what does that tell you? That where does enforcement directorate very specifically fit into the exam? Does it come under any specific direct indirect part of the syllabus? The answer is no. At the most, we use ED whenever there is an issue of unaccounted money. That's fundamentally the problem of money laundering. And money laundering is an outcome of corruption. So, at the most, using ED wisely, objectively, to counter the after effects of corruption would be one single point. But do we prepare the powers of the ED, the issues with ED in detail for our exam? The answer is fundamentally no. Are we clear on this? This is very, very important. Good. Simply because it is A, too political, two, the relationship between PMLA and ED is on a very thin line. It derives its powers from the PMLA without really getting a very exact source of its functions or powers. So those aspects also have to be kept into mind when things have to be prepared. Are we clear? Good. Let us start with the first part. When we're looking at the core laws in and around corruption, we first start with the IPC now, which is the BNS, and section 2 of the BNS defines what a public servant is. In fact, section 2, clause 29 or something. You don't have to remember the subclause number, but largely it is section 2 of the BNS which defines who a public servant is. Okay. Now, it is not just into, but also in several other places that it looks at in some form of public servant, but section 2 is our primary cause. If you generally look at section 2, it goes into excruciating detail, and in fact it is one of the widest definitions as far as public servant is concerned. Okay, so broadly speaking, IPC covers who all government employees of all classes, group A, group B, group C, group D. It also covers military officers, all services, all ranks. And when we say military, it means Army, Navy, Air Force. Central and police forces are anyways under government employees, they're under the center. Clear? Very specifically, the police is also covered. Judges and officers of the court. So, court staff also. And at the same time, any local authority, though local authority is exactly what has not been very clearly defined under BNS. Are we okay with this? Do we understand this? Yes. Now, not only this, what are the newer aspects of BNS? It also refers to the word company, right? It also refers to the word company. Give me a minute, Satvik. Can I please complete if that's okay with you? Not really a problem, right? Good. Now, so it when we look at companies, what the BNS has done is that it has given you an updated meaning of the word company. So, for example, it is not referring to, for example, it refers to a government company as defined under the Companies Act instead of just saying, a random company. So, they're trying to give you a better understanding of the word company. But here again, you're looking at largely government companies. Okay. Now, this is the primary focus of what the Prevention of Corruption Act is supposed to be doing. Right? Clear on this? Makes sense? Now comes the larger problem of, is this covered under, does it look at MPs or MLAs or any of those disqualifications? Now logically think of it. Reverse and go back and think of it in reverse. When we studied Representation of People's Act 1951, and if an MP was convicted under Prevention of Corruption Act, was there a possibility of his or her disqualification? Yes or no? Yes. So if that is the case, then the Prevention of Corruption Act should be applicable to MPs. Yes or no? Okay. If that is the case, then somewhere it must be written, members of parliament, members of state legislative assemblies, somewhere Prevention of Corruption Act must be mentioned. Good. Take a minute and tell me, and Satvik has an important question, I want to come back to that now. Then how are MPs and MLAs covered under Prevention of Corruption Act? Is it anywhere directly mentioned? Do you want to try? Go for it. Think of it. Yes. Very good, Ayushi. Sita Suresh and MB are MPs public servants. Okay. Mm-hmm. Offense oriented is okay. What did the recent High Court judgment tell you? Okay. All right. The words MPs and MLAs are not directly mentioned in the laws, correct? But they perform a public duty, and therefore, because they perform a public duty, they should technically be assumed to be a public servant, and that is exactly what the court has done. Okay. In fact, what was the case before Sita Soren? Remember PV Narasimha? In PV Narasimha's case, 1988, the court very clearly said that MPs and MLAs are public servants because they perform a public duty and therefore can be prosecuted under laws such as the Prevention of Corruption Act. Okay. Because when you look at the Prevention of Corruption Act, okay, the Prevention of Corruption Act in itself should have an updated definition, right? And here also, they do not very clearly define MPs and MLAs. They add stuff like array commissions and inquiries and heads of commissions and all of those things. Okay, good. Then the judgment has been consistently followed everywhere. Now let us understand a unique problem with corruption laws or the problem of corruption in general. See, whenever we look at corruption, there is somebody offering, let's simplify it, there's somebody offering a bribe, and there is somebody taking a bribe. Corruption is a very heavily demand supply oriented framework. Would you agree? Very heavily demand supply oriented framework. Now, there can be multiple scenarios here. Suppose A is the person offering a bribe and B is the person taking a bribe. Now, one has to be that B is demanding for it, right? there is a good chance that me may not have be demanding for it. A might just generally offer, right? Second would be that even if B has not demanded for it, A is generally offering, does that necessarily mean corruption? Yes or no? Correct? Which then adds to something more, which is you're offering a bribe, or you're taking a bribe to do something, right? That do something could have been anyways your legal duty to do, or you've been asked to do something which is not your legal duty to do. So if B is doing X, which is anyways B's job, isn't B simply doing their job? B would have anyways done this. B would have anyways done this. B does X, which is D, which is illegal, which is giving an exception. That is clear cut. What if you asked B to do something and they did not do it at all? Then, so corruption becomes a very convoluted problem to solve, right? Makes sense? Good. Now, over and above this, can there be a possibility where B can be harassed with frivolous complaints? Can there be a possibility where B can be harassed with frivolous complaints? Because if we start prosecuting B for literally anything and every complaint that can come, B will not be able to do their job, right? So you will have to protect in some manner, in some way, you will have to protect B from these frivolous complaints, right? Good. Now we also have to look at the concept of the doctrine of pleasure, right? If B is appointed at the pleasure of, let us say, Z, and B commits corruption and B has to be removed, what happens to the doctrine of pleasure? Yes or no? Because doctrine of pleasure says you, the person appointing you can only be the person removing you, right? Which is why, for both of these reasons, in corruption, you have the concept of sanctions or prior sanctions. Do we understand this? where you require some sort of permission that can be given to you by a higher authority whose job is to basically permit anti corruption inquiries against you. Are we clear on this? Clear? Good. Unless we do not understand this as an ecosystem, everything else is a waste. Now, prior sanctions will work when you are largely an appointed office. Prior sanctions are very difficult to work in an elected office, correct? So, for civil servants, for judges, for ministers, these kind of prior sanctions can work. There is a higher position somewhere. Yes, I just said prior sanctions are the same. Are we clear on this? Yes. So for appointed authorities, not a problem. Ministers, judges, civil servants, there will be somebody at the top. The problem will be with elected authorities, members of parliament, members of state legislatures, right? Technically, there is no higher authority. So if there is no higher authority, that means MPs and MLAs can be prosecuted. That means frivolous complaints can be against MPs and MLAs also. Yes or no? So that is why it has to be a very clear cut balance. You can't let them without a prior sanction, and you can't let them free also. So that is why, in cases of MPs and MLAs, if a particular MP or MLA has abused their current office and charge sheet has to be filed, then as on date of filing the charge sheet, the permission of the speaker is required. Clear? Make sense? Yes or no? Yes. So this is largely how anti-corruption laws are structured and formulated in our country. Now, any problems so far? Make sense? Good. Now, with anti-corruption laws such as the Prevention of Corruption Act, which significantly amends the Prevention of Corruption Act was originally 1947, now 1988, but significantly amended in 2015. Okay, good. The Prevention of Corruption Act largely has the same definition of public servants, but with a little bit of changes such as heads of inquiry commissions, etc., etc. But the larger process remains the same. Now, do we understand the concept of sanctions also? Yes? Good. So, corruption laws or corruption jurisprudence is about two parts. One, how do we solve the demand supply problem? And two, we must have some sanctions to ensure there are no frivolous complaints that are made in respect of these things. Are we clear on this? Makes sense? Good. Understood? Think. So with this base, I want to cover anti-corruption governance in this context. इससे ज्यादा आपको स्पेसिफिकली लॉज में जाने की जरूरत है नहीं. Although the Prevention of Corruption Act and the analysis is sort of important. So I will now want to do a little bit more on POCA. Is that okay with you? Yes or no? ठीक है. बढ़िया. So whenever we look at the Prevention of Corruption Act, it is technically your primary legislation in the country. First 1947, then 1988, then certain amendments were proposed in 2013, then 2015, and then the Prevention of Corruption Act of 2018 is by far and large the most comprehensive anti-corruption law in our country. Okay, so let's look at a detailed understanding of the Prevention of Corruption Act and with some degree of its relevant provisions. चलिए शुरू करते हैं. Originally still called the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, but as amended in 2018, the final amendments. Okay, what are its primary objectives? The mandate of the Prevention of Corruption Act, of course, is to combat corruption. And the most recent amendments are also to bring it in line with the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is ensuring that bribe givers and corporate liability, two aspects are also integrated. That giving a bribe should also be a crime as much as accepting a bribe is. Okay. It applies to public servants in a very, very wide sense of the term, which means government employees, government controlled corporations, judges, anybody performing a public duty. Anybody performing a public duty would be covered under Prevention of Corruption Act. Are we clear on this? So even if the BNS does not want to specifically get into this, Prevention of Corruption Act, by using the term public duty, enhances the ambit of it. Okay. Post 2018, Prevention of Corruption Act also applies to commercial organizations, companies, partnerships, bodies, any people associated with them. Because in the era of in the era of corporate lobbying, there are very good chances that the companies may be, bribing offices. So the directors or the key personnel in the company must also be liable. Are we clear on this? Yes. So generally LEJ, private companies, everybody is covered. Are we clear on this? Good. Now, so wide definition of public servant. Second, we've always understood corruption to be abuse of public office for private gain. But what would you want that gain for? That gain is primarily an undue advantage. That gain is primarily an undue advantage. So if the gain is primarily an undue advantage, what is it supposed to mean? Is that it? Does it mean that, oh, anything that you get apart from your salary is a problem? Here they have widened it. It could be monetary. It could be in any other kind or consideration. Any gift, loan, fee, reward, commission, property, anything is an undue advantage, right? And at the same time, an improper discharge of public duty. So now offenses are also tied to, let us say, you're giving a license preferentially. They're improperly discharging your duties. Are we clear on this? Yes. So, what is the general structure of offenses? So, generally, section 7 till about section, you would say 14, largely deal with the types of offenses. Okay. Now, section 7 is about a public servant who is being bribed. Let's just generally understand what this is. You don't need to necessarily remember uh, the exact section numbers per se. So, section 7 is about a public servant who bribes, a public servant who's being bribed. A public servant bribing is a rare concept, right? So, any public servant who is obtaining any undue advantage. Are you seeing the key terms? Undue advantage and violation of public duty. These are the key legal terms. This is the backbone of anti-corruption jurisprudence. So any public servant who is, obtaining any undue advantage of any kind, because of which public duty is also going to be improperly performed, this is the classic understanding of what exactly is corruption. Generally, the punishment ranges between 3 to about 7 years. Okay. Then section 7A, which has recently been introduced, which is also about, it primarily targets, the middlemen in corruption, the fixers in corruption, the people who are called influence peddlers. So any person who's accepting or, wants to, yes, wants to obtain any undue advantage because they have helped a civil servant do your job or have basically gotten your job done, they would also be liable for corruption. And then there is section 8, which is active bribery. If you yourself promise to give some undue advantage to a public servant, then also we will prosecute you. Do we understand this? Yes. Now the problem here is influence peddlers, or that we will get this done, we will take care of it. You give us the cash, we'll take it to the officer. We know the officer, he does the job. Now, somebody here who's offering a bribe is a crime. There is an exception to this. If within 7 days of offering a bribe, they report to the authorities saying that, we were forced to, or we're willing to cooperate with you, will be willing to become a government, informer and stuff like that. So you would not be charged. Then section 9 also deals with commercial organizations. When a person who is associated with an organization says, you give us this tender and we'll take care of you, So this is so because of this, the company is also largely under the scanner, and the key personnel also. This is this particular provision has been modeled on the UK Bribery Act, which basically is on the principle of, in law we call it strict liability versus vicarious liability. Okay, do we understand this? Yes. Now comes a very interesting section. What if a public servant who, without adequate consideration, without adequate stuff under the table, accepts or obtains any undue advantage from a person for something, for a business, whatever, what happens in that case? A public servant who's obtaining undue advantage without adequate consideration, does not matter, you will still be subject to corruption. Do we understand this? Yes. And then there is the concept of criminal misconduct, which means if you are dishonest or if you've intentionally enriched funds that are disproportionate to your sources of income, you would also be charged with criminal misconduct under Prevention of Corruption Act. And then there are habitual offenders also who keep doing this very, very often. Are we okay with this? Yes or no? And then you have concepts of prior sanction. Okay. Yes. So prior sanction is governed under section 17A and section 19, which basically say that you cannot conduct any inquiry or cannot undertake any investigation unless you have received a prior sanction. And they use a very, very vague term called competent authority. This is the term that they use. Clear? Good. The law also gives you the opportunity to set up special anti-corruption courts, which we haven't done to the extent that the law tells us, and basically say that we should have faster decisions so that people are out of office. Is a very serious offense. There is a rigid There used to be a rigid 2-year timeline, but now we're generally looking at approximately 4 years and a case should be over. Are we okay with this? Today we have a framework for a faster trial with a total maximum period of 4 years as far as the corruption case is concerned. Okay. Now, one of the reasons we made these major amendments and what the impact of these amendments have been is, one, to align it with international standards such as the UN Convention Against Corruption, because now bribe giving, corporate bribery is also corruption, and India has now moved sort of closer to the global anti-bribery frameworks. Two, the penalties for corruption have been enhanced, the ranges have been increased, and now you look at modern terms such as undue advantage, unjust enrichment. It's no longer just about, oh, money was being paid or not. On the other hand, while we've reached to the UNCAC, our understanding of criminal misconduct. Now, what is the relationship here? So, back in the day, if you were able to abuse your position to get any financial advantage, including some, acts that were very difficult to prove without any reasonable doubt whatsoever, there was a general wider range that was covered. Now, criminal misconduct largely looks at misappropriation or any form of disproportionate assets, simply because now it has become harder to prosecute for abuse of discretion. To give you a very simple example, let us say you are the collector. Four equally competent bids come to you who would construct a park in a in an open ground, almost equal in terms of competence, almost equal in terms of experience, almost equal in terms of the costing that they're giving you. Now, isn't it your discretion as the collector to authorize the tender to somebody, right? And you gave it to somebody who was known to you or was in the family. Now, technically, is that corruption or not? Okay, sure. Will you be able to prove it? Very difficult, because you're not making anything out of it. You're just helping a family friend out, or you're just helping somebody in the family get a government contract and get some money to earn a livelihood. You yourself may have not amassed any wealth per se. Yes or no? Makes sense? Good. So, on one hand, yes, on one hand, we have increased our compliance with Convention Against Corruption. On the other hand, we have reduced the intensity of criminal misconduct. Okay. Third, the way we look at prior sanctions, we've generally expanded the movement, the meaning of it. Prior sanctions used to be only in section 19. As I was telling you, they're now broadly covered under section 17A as well, which means that the idea behind prior sanctions was so that you can protect honest work done by civil servants. Now the problem is investigation cannot begin without a government approval. One thing is filing a charge sheet, one thing is beginning the investigation. Do you understand the difference between the two? Yes or no? So now, because of section 17A, you cannot begin an investigation without a prior consent. Section 19 was finally prosecuting, filing a charge sheet. Clear? So, prior sanction has been expanded. With now bribe givers also in criminal liability, bribe givers are now clearly criminally liable unless you've reported the crime within 7 days. It is very important to distinguish between collusive corruption, where both sides are willing to participate, versus coercive corruption. Coercive corruption is where you're being demanded to pay a bribe, right? Now, how effectively has these bribe giving provisions actually be implemented on ground? We don't have enough data. It is just a very recent set. Are we clear on this? Yes. So, if I look at broadly the larger positives and the negatives of the law, we clearly have what is called a better offense architecture, right? Separate provisions for public servants, intermediaries, bribe givers, commercial organizations. We basically have four types of people: public servants, middlemen, bribe givers, and commercial entities. Very clear offense architecture, right? Two, we have better penalties, better fines, better jail time, your property can be forfeited, special courts with a maximum time of 4 years, right? And of course, we are now better in line with global anti corruption frameworks like the UN Convention Against Corruption. But at the same time, we are highly dependent on prior sanctions and prior sanction anti-corruption frameworks like general trends globally. Prior sanctions may not be required for every offense, but prior sanctions are required for Prevention of Corruption Act and certain offenses under BNS. Do we understand this? Yes or no? Do we understand that a prior sanction is required for corruption related offenses? If an MP, MLA, collector has committed murder, do you require a prior sanction for it? Yes or no? No. You require prior sanctions for corruption related offenses. Clear? Good. Second, remember criminal misconduct is now slightly narrowed. Are we clear on this? Yes or no? Good. So, this is generally how your Prevention of Corruption Act works. Are we clear on this? Good to go? Make sense? Badhiya. Now our laws, our primary laws are done. Everything else is now law and body together. Yes or no? Everything else is now law and body together. Clear? Chalo. See you in the morning. Bye bye. We should be able to have better classes now because most likely by the end of today, my father should be shifted to, you know, non ICU room. We'll finish it in a week, Satvik. Please relax. We'll finish it in a week. Please understand I'm not able to take longer classes because of medical commitments. We will pull it up. We'll finish it within a week. Okay? Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Is anti corruption clear? Well done, Divyansh. Well done. Okay.